Good to meet you. Nice to Margaret. It's so good to meet you. Come on in. Hi, Frank.
How are you?
Y'all met Leslie, right?
Yes.
Out on the porch.
Well, here's to you ladies.
What I was wondering is what made you all want to be here with me today? I've been thinking a lot about why I wanted to do this response to my menopause journey, which has not been a fun one. And I was kind of interested in how you guys came to this day to do this project.
For me, it was just, I felt totally blindsided by all of the things that have happened to me. And maybe women didn't want to complain, or, you know, in my family, we're just one generation away from my grandmother, who was just like, you never talk about anything negative ever. And certainly not anything having to do with all your lady business. So I don't know, it's ridiculous. Anything I can do to get the word out for younger women or women who are just entering into perimenopause, I'm all about it.
Yeah, I felt the same way. I have a 19-year-old daughter, and I realized as I started going through hormone change, how, you know, at the same time as she is going through hormone change, how important it was for me to sort of articulate what was happening for me, because my mother had a hysterectomy at, I think she was 45, so there was no conversation about it at all. And it's, you know, I'm a health practitioner as well, and what I was noticing is my perspective on menopause and perimenopause from sort of a clinical perspective completely shifted once I started personally going through it, because you can't, it is hard to articulate until you're actually experiencing it. And I think that is the reason I wanted to be a part of this, because I think the more women can tell their stories and accumulate that information, because everyone's story is so different, so you can't just orient towards one story as being representative of what you're going to go through. So that was a big part of my interest, is just hearing from other women too, and sharing.
Well, I wonder if that's what's hard about, you know, the medical industry not being able to really help us go through it. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why, but I think part of it is that it's not like there's a list of symptoms like, oh, well, you know, you have a hot flash and then this thing is going to happen and clearly this is what's happening to you. And for so many women, it doesn't go in that really predictable order. And for such a long time, you think there might be something else wrong with you. And so, I mean, I think that might be part of why, you know, menstruation, it's really clear there's like one main thing that happens, and it's really clear what's happening to you.
Yeah.
But it's not so clear to, you know, figure out when you're in perimenopause. And I think lots of women don't realize that it can start in your late 30s too. So lots of times you're having random things happen to you and you're going, well, I'm only, you know, 39 or 42, so it must be some other thing that's happening to me.
That's a really good point. There's no point of demarcation. Like, you start your period, but when you start perimenopause, it's this long progression of changes that you've been accommodating at each year of your life, late in your 30s into your 40s. And so when it finally, really the overt things like hot flash started for me, that was when I first really oriented towards that. And at that point, you know, I was pretty well in. I just hadn't been able to identify that that's what had been going on until it was in retrospect, really.
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
I just thought it was summer in Texas.
And there's that.
You know? Yeah, when it happens in the winter, then you kind of have to take pause, but yeah.
Well, and I didn't know that the other stuff was, I mean, I started having hot flashes and I thought, well, dang, I mean, I guess that's what's happening right now. That's a pretty clear, like, that's the one everyone knows about. It's the one we all make fun of in pop culture, right? But I still didn't know that all the other things that were happening in my body were related. And so, and I don't even think I knew really that there was something that you can do about it, or that you might want to talk about with your, you know, health people to do something about it. You just, I don't know, I guess maybe I imagined there'd be a few hot flashes. I'd stick my head in the freezer. I'd yell at my spouse a few times, and then my period would stop. And
Right.
you know, like, and that would be like pretty much how it happened. And it just didn't happen that way.
Yeah.
It didn't happen that way. Susie,
I feel
cut
like
you off.
there's like, it's kind of like a death by 1,000 cuts. You just like have all these little things that are kind of happening, and you just cope with them like we do. You know, you just kind of take care of it and also ignore it. And you don't really realize that it's even happening. And what my interest is to find a way to thrive rather than just survive through this, and find a way that I can be my best self throughout this. And for me, I was, I had a few pounds I couldn't get rid of,
I'm so
little
happy it was just a
sluggish,
few for
right, right, a little sluggish, having to take a nap every afternoon, a lot of brain fog. And I was trying to kind of be pro-aging and thinking, well, I want to embrace this. I don't want to fight it. I'm like, this is what it is, and this is what it means to be middle-aged and going into menopause. And then I had my hormones tested and found out I had Hashimoto's, and just by doing dietary changes, having a low inflammation diet, and doing some supplements, I'm like a completely different person. And if I hadn't asked the right questions, then I wouldn't be feeling as good as I feel today.
What were some of your symptoms?
Well, I definitely started perimenopause early and had just like crazy bleeding. I mean, Scorsese movie.
I call it Shark Week.
Shark Week.
Wow.
It was Shark Week like twice a month at our house because I would bleed on ovulation too. So it was just so crazy. And my OBGYN was like, well, you need to get an ablation. And I was like, I'm a hippie. I don't do that kind of stuff. And he's like, okay, well, it's an environmental concern for the rest of us. So you need to have this. And I was like, okay. And then I did it. And because I thought, the perimenopause just meant like, 2 years later, I'm going to, be done with this.
That's just so funny that we all, I don't know about you guys, but that most of us thought that it was a like end of period,
Right.
and then
Hot
maybe
flash.
some crabbiness
Right.
and whatever. But my stuff it started with fatigue, just horrible fatigue and brain fog. And I was running a business and had 12 employees that were constantly asking me questions about stuff. And I'd just be like, I don't know. I just don't know. Make a decision. That's fine. Whatever.
The amount of time I've spent researching all of this stuff, I've just spent hours and hours and hours on the internet and looking up books and trying to find answers. Is that true for you guys as well?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I think it's interesting because, I know we're talking in specific about menopause, but I think this is an issue with women's health in general.
Yes.
It's not female-centric. And so, as we're all going through this, we're having to sort of be our own researchers. So definitely, I've done a ton of research and just, I guess in my practice too, I practiced probably 10 years before I started going through menopause and researching stuff. And then I realized all of this stuff that my female patients were experiencing was associated with perimenopause or menopause, like urinary frequency,
Right.
that's a big one, rashes, joint
Yep,
pain.
I had that one.
Oh, yeah.
I had a patient that had this vestibular disorder that was related to her hormones, and she couldn't stand up without feeling like she was going to fall down.
Wow.
And she subsequently joined a Facebook group with all these other perimenopausal women who had this issue, and it took them, talk about money.
Yeah.
I mean, I think each of them had probably gone to 10 specialists before someone knew that it was associated with female hormones. And I'm on a Facebook group that has 40,000 perimenopausal women, just like craving connection and like,
Wow.
I'm not crazy. I mean, it's a hunger. I think women really
I
need
think
to know that it's not just them.
And that is another one of the really important reasons that I wanted to be here today. I mean, if you can't make all this go away, the second best thing is to sit down at a table with a bunch of other really smart women who are going through the same thing, so that you realize A, that you're not crazy, and B, that there are some answers to your problems. But I think that's exactly it. We're having to spend so much time trying to find out that we're not alone, trying to find out that there are answers, and trying to find the answers ourselves, trying to do all that work.
Yeah.
Well, but not revealing it at the same time at work, or you gotta like make connection on Facebook, because you can't tell your coworkers, because then they'll know how old you are and what
Right, they're all private groups,
Right.
so like if you're on there,
right?
you're going through it yourself.
Yeah, because it's got to kind of like be hidden, which is so sad. That it's not embraced more.
I am irritated that when I talk about it, the first question everyone wants to know is how my spouse is dealing with it.
Right.
What? I mean, I love my spouse. I love my spouse. He is awesome. But seriously, the first thing that everyone wants to know when they find out that I'm going through menopause is how is poor Jimmy dealing with the bitch that I must be right now? And okay, the fact that it's true notwithstanding, I am annoyed by that.
Yeah.
I find it annoying that what is about in menopause and pop culture is jokes about women having to stick their heads in the freezer, and that I could come up against all of these issues and have zero clue. And I'm a reasonably smart person. I'm not stupid. I felt like, how could I not have any idea what was happening to me?
Yeah. What did you find as a good source of information when you were starting your research?
Just started Googling search terms.
Yeah.
I mean, the craziest thing that happened to me was I had inflamed tendons. I woke up one morning and I couldn't walk. And so by the time I wind up on blood thinners and having inflamed tendons, now I can't drive anywhere. So I have to take lifts. And so I had this lovely middle-aged woman Lyft driver, and I'm just like moaning about all this stuff. I'm starting to get a clue at that point that I think this might be, a lot of what I was going through might be hormone related. I announced to her, like, as this is a discovery, a eureka moment. And she goes, "Oh my gosh, girlfriend, even your leg stuff." And I went, "What?" She said, "Yes, that is also hormones." And she starts telling me all the things that your hormones can do. So I go home and I'm Googling estrogen and plantar fasciitis and estrogen and inflamed tendons. And sure enough, middle-aged women suffer from those exact things that I had more than any other group outside athletes, and it's related to estrogen. I was like, wow. Okay. So the orthopedic surgeon didn't mention this to me, and the hematologist didn't mention this to me, the physical therapist didn't mention this to me, but by God, they heard it from me after I Googled all these search terms.
Wow. Well, I hope you gave her a good Lyft review. 5-star rating, right?
Like, seriously. Also great medical advice. And a good tip.
Right, 20%.
Oh, man.
That's great.
So what's the freakiest thing that happened to you that you were not expecting?
For me, it was this weird mental dysphoria that was awful. I was having to close my business because our property taxes went up 120% in 1 year.
Wow.
So it was,
Austin.
and that was really traumatic and awful. And so all of that situational stuff was going on, but I also just couldn't, like, I was having panic attacks for the first time in my life, which seemed appropriate to the situation.
Right.
But when it was prolonged and it just kept going, pretty much every month I would have, I would have these week-long things where I would just wake up and feel like the worst person on the planet, that I completely suck, I'm a faker, I have zero worth, anything I do is gonna be shit, everything I touch is shit, I can't think straight. My mind is just totally atrophied. I guess this is how I am now. Like, I literally thought that I was never going to be able to do half of the things that I normally do. Even have a coherent conversation, certainly not start a new business or be able to believe in my abilities enough to be teaching again, which is what I do, teach sewing. And I was just self-doubt to the point where I was just so depressed that I started having suicidal thoughts for the first time ever. And I was like, what is this? I certainly felt a great deal of failure about my business going under. But, you know, I 12 weeks of therapy and we were just still coming up against the same thing. And it's like, this isn't it. This is all old stuff that I've worked through. And so it was devastating, and just trying to move forward. And I, you know, at this point, being on the other side of it, hopefully, because I've been doing some progesterone and definitely feeling better, but I'm still waiting for that other shoe to drop, you know. But it took me about a year to realize that that was a monthly thing. Once I realized it was around that, I at least could tell myself, like, hunker down, this is not real. But it took every ounce of strength that I had to keep reminding myself. I eventually just had to start writing it down and looking at this paper every day just to believe that that was a thing. And it's really fucked up my life. It's really scared me. I mean, it's still scaring me, because I just don't know. I don't know if it's over yet, you know?
Yeah, I relate to so much of what you're saying. You know, before I would be able to tackle something new or deal with stress, muscle through it, whatever, and I didn't have the muscle through capability anymore, and I was so full of self-doubt that my joy was ripped from my successes, and all of my failures were just blamed on me. Like, you know, there couldn't be any external thing. It couldn't just be bad luck. It couldn't just be a moment in time. It had to be like a huge failure. And every new thing that I was trying to do was so hard and felt like, you know, slogging up a mountain. And I think that's one of the reasons that keeps so many women from realizing that what they're going through is perimenopause, is this relationship between perimenopause symptoms and stress, because they actually magnify one another.
Sure.
And so often we've got so many rational reasons to be stressed out. Well, you're lonely, you've moved to a new place, you've lost your job, you're trying, you know.
It's all real.
And my kid is sick, I'm worried about my teenager. There's always a reason. The thing that has been surprising to me, and another reason I think women don't realize what's happening to them, is you're still having your period for such a long time. So the definitions, which were kind of new to me, were that perimenopause is all of that period that can start in your mid-30s and go all the way up until your period stops. And during all that time, 15 years or more, you can be having crazy symptoms, and then at some point, usually in your 50s, your period will stop, and when you haven't had it for a year, that's when you have menopause. And so that was all new to me, just like even knowing what was happening to me and what the names were. I found
the
to be
stages, even because there's definite stages, you know. I mean, I haven't had my period in 8 months now. I started getting really, really, really fucking angry, like all the time. And I was never, that was not something I ever felt like was a part of my personality. And I had a teenage daughter, so I was like, well, of course, you know, I'm pissed because she's like giving me a really hard time. Right, but I think that relationship to anger actually was something that I burned through, like through the last 4 or 5 years. And it, I think in a way now I kind of see it as a beneficial development, because I feel a little less like conflict avoidant, and I feel a little more sure of like what my perspective is on things, and a little more willing to take some ownership for that. So it was sort of an interesting psychological journey of like starting and then going through that process and kind of coming out to this side. I mean, I'm not through yet, but there are some benefits, I think, you know.
Yeah, for sure.
How old are you?
I'm 52, almost 53.
Yeah, I'm 51.
Okay, I'm coming up right behind you guys.
Defined as menopausal now. When I went to my OB appointment in April, that number was like way over. He's like, you're well in now. And I had just started my hot flashes and not sleeping well. And he's like, try hormone treatment if you want. And I'm like, give it to me. And just got on it right away. And it was game changer, miracle drug. I love it. I didn't take my estrogen one day, and oh my God, I couldn't stand anything that came out of my husband's mouth. I mean, he would say something and I would turn around and roll my eyes and just be like a 14-year-old, just like, oh my God, I hate him so much. And then, like, I realized around 5 o'clock, I was like, oh, I forgot to wipe that shit on my arm this morning.
And we're all coming at it from a really privileged place, right?
Yes.
And so, I mean,
Yes.
when I think about that, that makes me even more furious.
Mm-hmm.
But,
You know, it's
but the
expensive that stuff is.
information, yeah.
Right. And the money that if your insurance doesn't cover it, I was like, that's okay. Let me.
Whatever it
I've heard
takes.
you're good. I want
Right.
you. And that's not. You know, I think about
Fair.
that all the time. That's not something that everyone can do. And then,
Nope.
so if you can't do that, what do you do?
Suffer.
When you're talking about hormone replacement therapy, also, I mean, there's just so much misinformation and conflicting information. The thing about the internet, too, is there's old information and you don't always even know
Right.
if it's the most recent studies or are there even any reliable studies happening. So, you know, there's a huge concern. Even what my understanding was is that bioidentical hormones were a lesser risk for having cancer, having a cancer risk. And that's not true. And from what I've read, you know, and from what I've talked to with other women, and so, you know, that's also terrifying. It's like, well, there's this really wonderful stuff that can make you feel amazing and more yourself again, but there's also this big risk with it.
Well, I'm on the fence about hormones, actually. I was just talking to a friend about this the other day, because I think research kind of supports both sides. There is a protective effect for some cancers and bone health, and then there's also some risks that go along with it. And particularly, I think the latest stuff that I was reading is that there's sort of a window of opportunity right before you hit actual menopause, where if you start taking hormones then for a number of years, like 5 to 7 years, that it's more protective than risk. And then that diminishes, that ratio diminishes, over time. So,
I think I read that as well.
Yeah.
My doctor encouraged that because of that.
yes. I think that's the latest that's out there right now and what
The
people are
latest.
working off of, you
Right.
know, but that could change. I mean,
Right.
we're kind of all guinea pigs in a way, I think, for that. But
We are.
I've just been really uncomfortable with hot flashes, and my mind, I feel like my thinking is really not clear and I can't depend on myself in that way, and that's really unsettling to me. So for that reason, I've been thinking about venturing into that. So
Well, I jumped over the edge into it because I had thought about it for a long time beforehand, and it has been pretty amazing for me. I'm feeling really good right now. But I went from being somebody who doesn't take anything ever to having this like
my
giant shelf.
Handfuls.
Handfuls
I
of
know.
supplements.
Handfuls of pills.
And on top of it, the CBD and the collagen. And my doctor was even saying that some women stay on it even in their 60s because they like, you know, for your face and
Right.
and your skin and things like that. And they're like, no, I'm not ever getting off of it. And I'm feeling like I look in the mirror and I see myself, which I didn't see for a long time. There was, you know, about 4 or 5 years there that I didn't recognize that person.
Right.
And I feel like I do now. So it's kind of reclaiming myself.
I just find when I get really stressed, we were just on vacation, which was not supposed to be stressful, but
Yeah,
it was.
surprise, surprise.
I was dealing with my elderly parents, and so I think that whenever I get stressed, I just notice that I start getting a lot more hot flashes. But I have this theory about why I think it does get better, even if you have to not be on hormones, because I think we come into menopause, you know, perimenopause, like damn the torpedo years, like we were talking about stress, kids, relationships, starting with elderly
Aging
parents,
parents.
aging ourselves, our resilience is going down. But then I think once like this is my theory, is those hormones, like the caretaking hormones kind of recede, and we get better at taking care of ourselves and taking, you know, not necessarily overdoing it for other people all the time, and instead getting a little more focused on, you know, how do we feel and what do we need to do to take care of ourselves. And I think through that we build up a lot more of the, you know, adrenal health and thyroid health, and so we're not so like bottomed out and exhausted all the time.
If menopause gives you anything, it gives you like the you will now take care of yourself, or you're not going to be able to get out of bed, or like
Exactly.
you're not
There's
going to
no-
be able to walk.
Yeah, there's no choice. I mean,
Yeah.
you can't function if you don't take a little time and build
Literally.
Yeah,
It's
Yeah.
not just in that metaphorical way we say that. You literally will not be
can't.
able to get out of bed and do your life.
That is the biggest thing I see in my practice is that women, the fatigue, they have to go back to bed at 11 and there's just no relief from it, you know, and then they get back up and then it crashes again. And I mean, that how to function, you know, with that type of, but I do think it is, if anything, you know, getting to the girls when they're younger and helping them understand that process and how to, you know, create better ritual around self-care and just being in their bodies. Like, oh, I'm really tired. I'm going to take a nap, or I'm really stressed. I'm going to like go do something to help myself, you know?
It took me forever to say there's something happening inside my body that is beyond anything that I'm doing, and all the gratitude and all the meditation and all of,
And all
you
the
know,
personal strength, like they're just your courage and your, you know, that you've worked really all through your 20s, 30s, and 40s to kind of, you know, whatever bullshit that you had. I mean, all women have this just, you know, lack of self-esteem or just, you know, negative thoughts about themselves, about yourself, about your body, about, you know, your career, whatever. You know, I was really on a really upward trajectory with that and was feeling so empowered and so just risk taking and reaching higher and higher, and then this crash was just fucking
feels like a wave that takes your sandcastle out to sea.
how the fuck am I going to get myself back to that place when I am so beaten down? I don't have physical strength. I don't have mental clarity. And how does all of that strength and all of those accomplishments and all of that overcoming, you know, adversity, I'm just the most positive person too. And then for all of that to just fall away, it's just feels like an uphill battle for sure. But I'm finally you know, like a little rub on the arm, little dab every morning, and like finally I'm starting to like climb back and just like enjoy being with my students and realizing like I know a fuck ton about all of this stuff, and I'm really helping people and changing people's lives again, and you know, having that kind of gratification or just that, you know, rewarding feeling is starting to kind of feed back into this empty well.
Right.
I mean, being like looking down in there and trying to reach out and be creative or be, you know, entrepreneurial, and having that thing empty is just the most devastating feeling that I've ever had.
One of the reasons that I really wanted to circle back to do this program is that the thing about forums and podcasts is that the majority of the people are women like us. They're women they're on their menopause journey. And that is so awesome, and it is so useful to find out that you're not alone. But I feel like this needs to be had in a wider conversation because we don't know how to talk about it, because our moms were afraid to talk about it, because we need to have it out there, because workplaces aren't menopause friendly. I know there were some women who were going to join us in our conversation today who didn't come because they have businesses and they were worried about what would happen to their businesses if you know, people found out that they were having fatigue and brain fog. And so the thing that was kind of shocking to me, I heard on a podcast, a woman was talking about, you know, this question that we keep bumping up against. Why were we so blindsided? Why did we not have any information about this? I think it's different for us than it was for our moms. A lot of our moms had hysterectomies. They didn't have language to even know what was happening for them. But there was a woman sharing that her situation was similar, and the reason that her mom wouldn't talk about it was because her grandmother had been put away. In the generation before that, you got put away if you were depressed. So no wonder we've got a history of having to silence ourselves for our own sanity, for our own freedom. No wonder our grandmothers didn't talk to our moms about it, and our moms therefore didn't have any language to talk to us about it. So like we're the ones who have to kick that dang door down.
Bingo.
Well,
Bingo.
I think we definitely are, and I think we've been lucky. Leslie and I have had a group of women that we all gather and talk and have so much support, and we talk about this stuff all the time. And I know my daughter and her friends do. My daughter's a doula, and so she's interested in all things vag, and her and her friends are all super vag positive, and they talk about this stuff all the time. It's there's just no taboo around it, and even less for them than there is for us.
Right.
So I think we are kind of healing it slowly but surely.
You've got, I don't know, a new brain space, a new take on the world because of the battle you just went through or you're currently in the midst of fighting, and it makes you want some different things. So I mean, I think that's kind of cool.
Yeah, I think the irony of that is I feel like my decisions are being made from a different place in myself.
Yeah.
Not so much ego-driven or success-driven.
Right.
But I think that things will, I think that's the big surprise is I feel like I am making changes. But they're not exactly what I would have sort of mentally have thought through. In my earlier years, I would be like more goal-oriented.
This is what I want.
Yeah.
Right.
It's not like that. It's sort of listening to a different part of myself, I would say. And getting to know myself in a new way, because I'm not quite the same person. From the time you start menstruating till the time you stop, all of a sudden those hormones just recede, and then you are a different person in so many ways. And that's like where I think that people that are taking hormone therapy and going through transition can really speak to, is how directly it impacts your emotional health, your brain health, your personality.
Right.
And so there's consistency, but then there's also transition, of some sort. So
I think it's an opportunity for reinvention. And I feel like, as the female of the species is biologically irrelevant at menopause, and the way that we change our DNA is only through sexual reproduction. So there is no advantage for all this post-menopause. We don't make the things we need for our body. So we have to figure out what food to put in there or how to take care of ourselves, because we're not making it. We can't, do all the things that we used to do, but we don't have the monkeys on our back that we used to have. We don't have the raging hormones that we can't control as much either. There's there's so much possibility out there, and I kind of feel like, for me, I feel like I'm discovering who my true self is without this other bullshit on there. I don't feel the need to take care of people the way that I used to in a more codependent way. I am a caretaker, and service to other people is my mission, but I can do it without so much attachment or expectation or all the other bullshit around it. I can be just true to myself, and I feel like this, second half of our lives that we get this opportunity to have after 50, after menopause, is like this huge opportunity for reinvention. And I'm quite frankly super excited about it.
Yeah.
And to not have so much bullshit wrapped around it.
But I think that may be one reason why we don't talk about it much in our culture. Until very recently, women really did become irrelevant after they were non-childbearing.
And then soon after they became in the grave.
Right.
Well, that's it.
Or put away.
We're
talking about
asylum or grave.
Yeah. So hopefully that's part of what we're all doing, is reinventing the the second half. And I see a lot more of that on social media for sure. Like, it's exciting to see how much is going on about midlife and then beyond, and what women have to offer, as a gender, but also as individuals, and because a lot of the clutter does get cleared away. You get clearer, I think.
Yeah,
eventually.
I think so. Yes,
there definitely is like a stripping away of all the just accumulating things and achieving things, and you get down to really more of what's important.
This has been really great. It's good to be with all of you and sit at this together.